Good morning, Michigan. My name's Phil Ike, and I'm here in Grosse Pointe for another episode of the Michigan Main Street Story Series with my two new friends, Cindy and Casey, here in Grosse Pointe. I'm ashamed to say this is my first time in Grosse Pointe, but man, what a cute Main Street downtown. I was flying the drone, got kind of a bird's eye view of this place, so I'm going to have to come back when I'm not working. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of Grosse Pointe, maybe let's just start off by introducing yourselves. Give us a little bit your name and a little bit about what you actually do here. Cindy, you go first.
I am Cindy Wilcock, and I'm the new executive director of Main Street Grosse Pointe. Yay, I've been here for just over a year. I've been in the Main Street world for probably about 13 to 15 years. I started out as a volunteer, so working with volunteers and working with Main Streets and small business really was an accidental job, but it ended up being my passion that I can't seem to leave, and I think I've found probably the greatest place to do it here in Grosse Pointe.
Yeah, so you're new here, but not new to the Main Street world. Where were you before Grosse Pointe?
I was in Ferndale, which is where I grew up as well. Not long after I started in Ferndale, they became a Great American Main Street Award winner. So so my first Main Street experiences were kind of like being a rock star. And then I realized how much work it is to be a rock star. It's not all glory, but it's so much fun. It's the hardest job you'll ever love. I've heard it said, and I think that's true.
And I'm sure we'll get into this as the conversation goes on, but I'm sure it's kind of exciting being in Grosse Pointe because they are relatively new. Here you're coming from Ferndale, one Great American Main Street, and then Grosse Pointe. It's really kind of the beginning grassroots stages of this program here, and that's got to be exciting.
Absolutely. That's part of what really excited me, was that they were a new program, but the incredible buy-in by everybody in this city, from a tremendous board of directors that was put together, the business owners, the city, the elected officials, city staff, everybody was 110% behind Main Street and the Main Street effort. So it was a great opportunity to walk into all that enthusiasm and all that energy and all that excitement for what we can do.
Casey, what about you? Introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do here in Grosse Pointe.
Hi, welcome. I'm Casey Malley. I am the Main Street Board of Directors chair at the moment, and I'm also a lifetime Grosse Pointer, and I own a business here in the village.
We got a lifetime Grosse Pointer seated next to an outsider. Was that weird at all? Like when you were searching for a director, was it like, because understanding how communities want to kind of pull from people who have been here, but talk to me a little bit about that.
That's a good question. That did come up a lot during our interview process, whether anybody from outside of Grosse Pointe could really understand our community, how it's unique. It's a little strange. People joke all the time, Grosse Pointe's a bubble. People come back and there's a half a degree of separation here. So there's so many connections and ties. And so the joke is always, you marry somebody from Grosse Pointe, you move here and you're an outsider. But we fought hard for Cindy because we saw in her during that process somebody who could understand, even though she isn't from here, could understand Grosse Pointe, but could also bring us an outside perspective, which I personally thought was really important. She has the Main Street know-how and background there, but she is an incredible people person. So, a lot of the lifetimers are a little hard to crack, and Cindy has been able to really, really connect with people, everybody from business owners to community members and city officials. She's really good with people, so I think it was the perfect fit.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about being new in this community but not new to Main Street, I mean, bringing in 12 years of experience, that's a big deal in the Main Street directing world. I mean, you're looking at somebody with a decade plus of experience coming into your community as you're starting something from new. I mean, that's the ball rolling really fast from the beginning.
It really is. And I think that we didn't understand, we knew we wanted to be a part of it, but I still feel like I'm learning every day what it takes to be a really good Main Street community. So yeah, it was really important, I think, to have that background, and she teaches us things every day.
Yeah, maybe Casey, talk to me about the time before you became a Main Street program, because a lot of communities might hear about Michigan Main Street and think, oh, we kind of know what it is, we're thinking about it, but talk to me about why was Grosse Pointe interested in the Main Street program, how the process of becoming Main Street?
Well, people probably wonder, why did we need Main Street? Like you said, from the drone photos, we really do have the quintessential, Main Street downtown. The physical plant is pretty good. We have a decent mix of stores, but I think that's a little bit misunderstood sometimes. Even though we had the pieces in place, we still needed Main Street very, very much. We had a big anchor here for a lot of years. We had a Jacobson's, actually 2 Jacobson's locations right here in the village.
Oh, wow, you had 2 of them.
We had a home store, and we had a Jacobson's department store, actually in the building we're sitting in. And when they left, it was pretty much devastating to our downtown. It was a long time of mourning the loss of those resources and trying to recreate and figure out, how to move forward from that. I moved my business here after that had all taken place, kind of had our recession time, and there wasn't much happening. And when I got here, I realized that back in the day, there was something called the Village Association, which was a group of people that got together. They planned events. They did that kind of thing. And that had gone defunct during that time. So I tried to pull together the retailers really just for the sake of communication, to help plan events and things like that, but quickly realized how far in over my head I was if I was going to do that justice at all. So when the mayor happened upon this program and brought it to us, I was the first one to say, I am not, I'm not equipped.
I'm sorry to interrupt. That's such an important point, and one that hasn't really been brought up in these conversations so far, in that can you do things that Main Street does by yourself? Maybe, but I love how honest you are in saying, like, I am not the person to be doing this, because sometimes in communities, and as a small business owner myself, we get into this trap of, well, I'm independent, I can do it myself, and I can do it, and I want to do it my way, and we're not always aware that it's not as good as it could be, or that it should be, or it's taking 10 times longer than what it needs to if we just deferred to somebody else and say, hey, you know what, we actually have to do this right. We have to create the structure. We have to put the right people in place, as opposed to just trying to forge on ahead independently. I love that.
We couldn't get out of our own way, honestly. Yeah. And when we realized that the Main Street ideology is just a framework and a structure, and it's proven, and it makes sense. It goes down to like the most basic level, and it organizes the organization and gives you the resources to be successful. And, we were sort of just reacting. We were not very intentional, because we're wearing a million hats, right? So we're relying on people who already are so overtaxed. And we had no, like I said, I was in over my head. Leadership is so important when you're trying to be effective. And we didn't have the time or the energy to put forth really good leadership. And we went to Howell as a group to sort of see that introduction, and this would be a dream, and we still are taking baby steps. We talk, Cindy and I and the board and our exec board talk all the time about how we can better fit ourselves into the Main Street structure, because it takes a lot of effort and time, and we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, so many of our communities do have a long way to go, and I mean that in the best sense.
Absolutely.
Because our communities are forever. I mean, if you want to really pull back the lens, like Grosse Pointe, hopefully will be here till the end of time. And so in that respect, like, we do have time to build the communities that we want. I mean, think about if you would have started Main Street strategies and planning and methodology 10 years ago or 20 years ago, what kind of product that would have, And sometimes it's discouraging looking at it from the start. Like, oh man, it takes 1 to 3 years to become a Main Street program, or what man, and that's a blink of an eye in the lifetime of a community. So how long did it take you to move from this point of, yes, Main Street is something that we want to pursue, to actually becoming a Main Street program?
Well, I think it was about a year and a half. We did butt up to the pandemic, which was tricky because, first of all, it was, Main Street wasn't functioning the way that it was accustomed to functioning, as far as like bringing in new communities and celebrating those inductions and things like that. But it was a process. I would say the application process was probably a year and involved a lot of people to get that going. But it also gave us time to sort of get a buy-in from different stakeholders. And it's funny you mentioned the longevity of a program, because Cindy and I were just saying, some people still think it's like 3 years and you're done. Like it's like a 3-year and then it's over. That's just a little bit of a misnomer, right? You have to have that long-term vision. And we just keep saying we want to lay the groundwork for the next group. And and that's the challenging part of being a new community, is you do feel like you have the responsibility for setting it up in a way that you can hand it to the next group, and that they can be successful with the methodology.
Yeah, you want to pass them a torch that's lit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Cindy, I have a question for you.
Okay.
As a newcomer to Grosse Pointe, how would you describe Grosse Pointe to somebody who's not ever been here, either in kind of the physical structures of it, or just kind of the community fabric of it?
I think the community fabric for sure is something that people outside of Grosse Pointe really don't understand, what a welcoming, open community this is. It's very relaxed. It's not this stuffy Grosse Pointe that people tend to think out that don't live here. It's been incredibly welcoming, and the community involvement and the buy-in and the pride that people have in the downtown and in the community is something that you don't see in a lot of places. The positivity, even though, like Casey said, things don't happen super quickly, and we've spent this last year really starting to lay that foundation. People are still supportive, and they're not negative, and they want to get behind what we're doing, and they want to understand more. And we're in that phase where we're still educating people, but it's such a great place to be. And physically, the buildings and the streetscapes and the neighborhoods, the sidewalks are wide and tree lined, and it's gorgeous. It's what you see in a Hallmark movie almost as a downtown. It's and the buildings are wonderful and in good shape, although we could probably give some a little refreshing. But the bones are here, the good things are here, and we've got such a great opportunity to build on what we have.
When we were talking, Cindy, before this interview, we talked a little bit about how Grosse Pointe is at this stage, and kind of referencing the fact, relatively new to the Main Street program, of trying to move to this next level. What is the next level for Grosse Pointe? Trying to get there for both of you, and Cindy, I'll ask you first, and then Casey, if you'd like to speak to that as well. For you guys, what is the next level to Grosse Pointe? Where is the place that you're trying to take Grosse Pointe in the next 3 years, 5 years?
I think we want to become more of a destination, not just for our local people, but for people in and around all the points. So creating that sense of place where there's always something happening in the village, and creating some cohesion and a vision that people can see and understand, and just really stepping up the game. Like I said, the bones are here, the foundation is here and solid, and how do we take it to that next level and inject some energy and have some cohesion to what we're doing, so that we get more buy-in and more support, and create that Grosse Pointe that everybody remembers fondly from their childhood.
Casey, what about you?
I would say yes, and agree with everything that Cindy says. As we've evolved through our process, our board identified that we were having a little bit of an identity crisis. We didn't know what we were. And there are other districts in Grosse Pointe, and we have so many resources here. But we wanted to know, and we asked ourselves, what what is the village? What do we want it to be? We want it to be a community center. We want to activate spaces. We want people to feel like they can, bring their families. We want to be very inclusive. All of those things, I think, have such a long-term process to them. So for me as a business owner, I'd like to see the businesses feel like they're in a place where they have good customer support and good traffic and those kinds of things. But I'd also like for Grosse Pointe itself to feel proud of the identity we've created here, like that they feel part of it, that they feel like they can come here and feel at home and, be excited about that.
You're at the beginning stages of strategic planning. So you've both kind of mentioned what the next level is, strategic planning, trying to figure out how do we get to the next level. Are there any elements to this strategic plan and the ideas of how do we get ourselves there that you'd like to point out, a way that you're going to get Grosse Pointe to the next level?
Well, I think definitely continuing to build and grow on that broad-based community support and share that vision. That vision began to come about because we spent the time talking to people and hearing what they think about the village and what they want to see here. So I'm excited to bridge that gap between celebrating the history and bringing us into the newest century, the latest century.
Yeah, maybe this is a tangential segue, but I think it is a segue. One of the buzzwords in placemaking, community development, we like to throw around is transformation. And one of the things I think is that we have to be very specific about the way that we speak about transformation, because there is such a thing as good transformation and bad transformation. For you here in Grosse Pointe, or for you, maybe Cindy, with your experience from Main Street, or Casey as a business owner, what makes good transformation good and bad transformation bad?
Well, first of all, I think sometimes it's the word transformation. We don't want it to imply that there's something wrong and we need to transform to something else.
Yes.
I think it's almost more of an evolution. Transformation is supposed to be evolutionary, I think. It's supposed to kind of take on what's good and take it to the next level and make sense for the community and make it something that can continue. Transformation, you don't do it once and it's over. You continue to transform and be flexible and identify things that make you shift your focus a little bit in a way that makes sense, that keeps that ball rolling forward.
Oh, I love that answer so much.
I think it's perfectly said. What we are trying to be careful and not do is to try and do everything at once and to bite off more than we can chew, or to do many, many things sort of medium well. And I think that the hard thing for a new Main Street community is that you start to try and prove your worth because, we've spent all this time and now we're here and people say, I don't get it. I don't understand what you're doing. But remembering that, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. That's I think, one of the pitfalls is that you want to prove to everybody that Main Street is going to be amazing, but you also know that the whole point of Main Street is to build the framework and go slow and build it well.
And I think, Casey spoke a little earlier about the length of time that it took to become a Main Street and the impact of COVID kind of being in the middle of all that. So I think people were really even more anxious to see immediate change. Like, we're here, we're Main Street, what's different? So that's been a little interesting to manage that expectation and make sure that people understand that we have made a lot of progress already. And we've got a plan and we're working towards that plan. And that plan makes sense in a way that we can sustain it and grow it, and that everything fits together.
And I think an issue there too is trying to educate the general public that incremental approach to building a better community is necessary, because if Cindy from Ferndale comes walking in here and she waves her magic wand and Main Street comes in, and in six weeks we have a completely different community, is that community focused? Probably not. Is it going to be incorporating the input and the support of citizens in every demographic? Probably not. Are they changes that are sustainable and permanent? Probably not. And so the structure and the framework and this incremental approach is also almost like a safety net that says, hey, if we're going to do this, we want to make sure that this is representative of the community. Think about like public art. Public art is amazing, but just like we were talking about with transformation, you can have bad public art. You can have art that would look great and embraced by a community over there, but not in this community over here. And so you do have to take your time to make sure that it's reflective and supportive.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the questions they asked me in my interview is, what are your plans and how would you transform the village? And I said, I don't have a plan because it's not supposed to be my plan. These plans work because of community buy-in and stakeholder buy-in and gathering all that information. And you don't want somebody to come in and tell you right off the bat how they're going to change your downtown. You have to have somebody who's going to listen. Yes, they should have ideas, but they shouldn't let their ideas over-influence what the community's saying, because you're never going to be successful that way.
So people, if you are listening to this podcast and you're putting in a resume for a Main Street director position or DDA or whatever it is, that's exactly the right answer. When the board says to you, like, we want you to come to us with a 25-page strategic plan for revitalizing our downtown with numbers and costs and things like that, you go to them and you give them a completely blank sheet and say, we just need to listen first. Right. And
you walk the fine line of people wanting to see change and people at their core being resistant to change. So Cindy has been really good at managing expectations while not scaring people, because the history here is so deep and change is hard.
Yeah.
Change is hard.
Change is hard. When speaking about change, one of the benefits of COVID was, kind of weird to say benefits of COVID, but this is a benefit of COVID, thrusting placemaking into kind of the general consciousness of people. It used to be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you'd say the word and people, I don't know what that means. But here, in placemaking, typically we assume that that's an adult thing. That's what adults do. That's what you do at council meetings. That's what you do at economic development. But here, we just talked to a young man named Jake. Cindy, tell me about Jake.
Yeah, so Jake is a local Boy Scout with a Boy Scout troop here in Grosse Pointe, and he's working towards his Eagle Scout rank. So he had reached out to actually the city manager in one of the other points, who then passed him along to the city manager, Pete Dame, here in Grosse Pointe, because Jake lives in Grosse Pointe, and the city manager was nice enough to pass him along and say, hey, I bet you have something on Main Street that he can work on. So, it was the beginning of a great relationship. That's the first time I've worked with a student in that capacity, and we were right in the middle of our stakeholder interviews for Main Street. So Jake took part and listened in on those. We walked the village. I listened to his ideas. I was a 16-year-old at that time, what he thought we needed, what he thought was working, what he thought wasn't working, talked about our desire to really start better activating our public spaces. And this idea evolved because we had talked about getting some bistro tables and chairs and giving people kind of space to hang out, especially while we were still working through the pandemic. People want to be outside and spaced out and maybe giving them activities. And he came up with this great idea to build chess tables so that people had a place to gather and to do something. And the project took longer than he anticipated. He ran into all sorts of crazy roadblocks, but he persevered. He kept on it. He kept in communication. And we just installed these great tables on our plaza. And
again, to folks listening to this, I want to point out, I just talked to Jake. I interviewed Jake, and something that conversation kind of reminded me of Another young man I met in Charlevoix who runs Government Now, and it's about how do we get kids from the community on DDA boards specifically. And between him and between Jake, it was a great reminder of the actual legitimate resource that kids, young adults, those under 18 can provide to our communities. And I'm not saying that just because they're kids and they, do a little art project and, oh, isn't that nice? Like, this is legitimate, positive change for every single person within a community. I mean, those chessboards are beautiful. If I could play chess well, I would definitely use them. But that's something that, one, is pulling these youth into the community, but is excellent as well. Sometimes we like to pat kids on the head and say, oh, isn't that nice? Now go back to your classroom. But here is Jake out in the street creating this with help and with other Boy Scouts, getting involved in the community and helping also him dig those roots deeper, because he gets to pass those chessboards every single day with people playing and say, I made those. I made some kind of contribution. And one of the great quotes I heard, I forget by who, was, people stay where they feel valued. And here's a way that a community, a beautiful way that says, hey, we value enough to say, help us change this place a little bit. I love it so much.
Yeah, and another interesting thing is that kind of acted as a springboard, and we had a troop of Girl Scouts reach out to us.
Nice.
And now they want to do a project.
Oh, got to one up the Boy Scouts. I like the spirit of competition there.
But it's a great way to involve the youth in our community. As we were going through the transformation strategy identification process, the projected census data showed, for 2019, so a couple of years ago, that almost 25% of the people in Grosse Pointe are age 18 and under.
Wow.
So it's a definite untapped market with so full of potential. And so being able to showcase through Jake's project and this upcoming Girl Scout project how youth can make a difference in the community, and we can start them early, they turn into lifelong volunteers and supporters.
Wow. Well, 25%?
Yeah, it was like 24.4%. I rounded up.
That's quite the number. I mean, it just says so much, too, to our communities that might be struggling with population loss. They might have a similar demographic, and if you ignore 25% of that community until they turn 18 or they can get jobs, I mean, no wonder they leave. And so I love when you said it's an untapped resource. It's just like tapping into them and saying, kids, we want you here. We value your input. Howell does a great job of that as well, Charlevoix. Just love to see that in these communities. Talking about Jake's project, are there other projects or initiatives kind of coming down the line that you want to talk about, either in placemaking or with Main Street or anything like that?
We're still planning bigger projects. So we've got some smaller projects that we think will be really impactful. We've got something else going into that plaza area.
Cool.
We're working with a local muralist, and we're going to paint a piano and put it in the mural in the plaza.
Yeah.
Just to add some color and add some, again, public art, but interactive public art to get people engaged.
You may not be able to play chess, but you could play the piano.
Exactly.
Different strokes for different folks.
And we focused this year, and partially through a grant that we received from Michigan Main Street, for enhancing our holiday decor. Holidays are a really big deal in the village. It's very, very Hallmark in the best way possible. The tree lighting is spectacular.
I was going to say the tree lights had to be rad.
Yeah, the whole town turns out, and we close the side streets down, and there's marshmallow roasting, and the school choirs sing, and the Community Foundation does a great job of decorating the tree, and it literally lights up that entire corner, and it's just a really feel-good community event. And so we're enhancing the Christmas decor. We're doing all new garland and lights. We're looking at some signature pieces for the ends to kind of really tie our downtown together. We're putting new lights on the clock tower that we can program and change the colors and do some fun things with, because the clock tower is such a focal point of Main Street in Grosse Pointe. It's right in the middle of town, so we want to make sure we're taking advantage of that and drawing people's attention to that as well.
Yeah.
One other thing that I think is a huge goal for us, but as a new Main Street community, also proving to be a challenge is our volunteer recruitment. So that's something that's top of our list. We just need to build. We need to, build that, and it needs to be deep so that we have the resources to, to follow through on some of the projects that will be coming. But I think that's again a huge groundwork. Initiative.
Yeah, I love that you're really pointing out that volunteers aren't just automatic. A lot of times if we're not in the thick of community work, we kind of carry ourselves with this assumption that there's lots of volunteers and they're crawling out of the woodwork to come build that thing or help with that event or whatever it is, but it takes a lot of work to develop that really necessary core, because all of our communities we're not backstroking through piles of gold and diamonds and things like that. And so we do need, one, that assistance, but then two, we also need to create that a level of ownership that I played a part in making that thing. And that takes work to get those people.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does.
When Casey, as long as I'm talking to you, and then Cindy, I'm going to throw it to you. Obviously, it's going to take work to kind of build the Grosse Pointe that Grosse Pointe citizens deserve and want. Kind of pointing out what Cindy said earlier, not that it's bad, but that we understanding what else can we do? How can we make this place even better? When you think about that and looking into your crystal ball, Casey, of Grosse Pointe's future. What do you see happening? What do you want to see? And maybe this is kind of a wish list, but what do you want to see in Grosse Pointe's future?
When I look into the future, I see vibrancy. I see a connected Main Street, and I see it not only connected, business owner to business owner, but the village to the greater community. Using the public spaces, I think is going to help us meet those goals. It's a hard question because I feel like I've learned so much in the time that I've been involved in this. Definitely a labor of love. And when I went to their National Main Street Conference a few months ago, I was overwhelmed at the scope of it. It's so much bigger than people understand, so much bigger than I knew. And I came away and my head was exploding with possibility. But it's just processing it, because, right, people might say, why did we need to do this? We're good. I mean, we're doing okay. But everybody needs to come out of their own, lane, very narrow lane, and sort of become a part of the bigger picture. And I think we could go for decades utilizing all the ideas and opportunities that Main Street sort of puts in front of you. So I would just love to see us meet our potential.
I love that you point out that it's more than just projects and events, that the scope of what you can do or what's needed to do and within a community is vast and infinite. And outside looking in, it's like, well, there's a piano on the street, or there's some chessboards. Like, well, can't we just keep doing stuff like that? But it goes considerably deeper than that.
Well, and funny enough, I came around the corner this morning and I saw you talking to Jake, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I know that guy," because I had sat in your session, and storytelling was not anything that I ever considered, and of course it's important. And until I heard your presentation and saw some of the ways that you had done it with other communities, I was like, yes, everything that my personal business puts on social media gets about 1,000% more attention if my business partner or I are on there. People want to connect. Not only to my business, but to the village and to Main Street. And the only way you do that is by telling stories and helping people to say, yes, I know that person, and now I know them better because I know their story. So again, it's infinite.
And it helps build commonality too. You find out you have things in common with people that you didn't know you had in common. And you find out if you shared the same passions, or you went to the same school even. So I agree with Casey. I think storytelling and making those one-on-one and personal connections, because it's not easy to be a small business owner. And I have such tremendous respect for what these people do. These business owners, and especially these business owners here, are just incredible. But people need to know that there's a person behind there that has a passion, and the business owners need to be able to share their passion.
I won't step up on the storytelling soapbox too hard, but I just to give that a little bit more context too. So I do storytelling work for the city of Saginaw, and we publish a feature story, 2 of them, every single week. And so it's told in multiple parts. So Monday is part 1, Tuesday is part 2. It's one business owner. They get 5 straight days where they get to tell their story to the world. I've done that work for them for 3 years, and just scratching the surface of really knowing the depth of that community. And I'm trying to give that context to people because we think that we know us, right? We think that we know Bay City or Grosse Pointe because I've been here all my life. Like, of course I know my community. It's my community. But that experience of doing that story work for the city of Saginaw has just been an eye-opener for me. It's like, we don't actually know who we are if we don't actually listen to people. Or you could say, I'm really engaged in the community, but with who are you engaged? Because it could be a very biased perspective of the community. And so that, I think, is the ultimate power of storytelling, is it gets to that idea of knowing thyself. Right? How can you actually help a community that you don't really know? How can you love a community that you don't really know? And I'm going to, like, if you are a community super fan and you love where you live, that is amazing. You will love it even more if tomorrow you say, I'm going to sit down and talk to somebody I don't know, ask them why they're here, why they do what they do. It's just one of the most beautiful experiences. And I love that you guys brought up the storytelling aspect of it, because that's the outreach, right? And the inreach. Like, this is who we are. We are people. We are people. We are people. We are people. People create stories. Stories create communities. And if we just focus on creating the community and not the stories and not the people, we're missing 2 big pieces of that. It's just, yeah, I love what you guys talking about.
It goes back to our identity crisis.
Yeah.
That we need to know who we are.
Yeah.
And that was part of one of our original goals.
Yeah, love it. When you guys talk about Michigan Main Street and joining this Main Street program, you're at the very beginning of it. But so far, Cindy, I'll ask this to you. What have you seen is the benefit of Main Street so far in Grosse Pointe? And then Casey, I'll follow up with you after.
Well, I think the benefit of Main Street and being part of Michigan Main Street is the tremendous amount of support and resources that are offered, the structure, the constant support, the constant ability to help us be better at what we are, to help us with that framework, maintain that course, and just keep moving forward. I think it's so important to not lose sight of the bigger picture and to work towards a plan, because there's so many things happening and so many opportunities every day that you can jump from project to project, to person to person, to fire to fire, and at the end of the week or the month or the year not have any idea what you accomplished. So being able to use the Main Street approach and have measurable outcomes and measures of success, I think, is huge. And in the long run, people will start to understand that as they see the progress that we've made. It's steps, and sometimes it's baby steps. And one event or 1 week or 1 month or even 1 year doesn't bring about transformational change, but it starts that emotion. And when we look back 3 or 5 years from now, I think we're going to be at a far different place. But there's going to be growing pains along the way.
I want to repeat something you said, because you were dropping bombs today. You said it helps us be better at what we are. And I love that, because sometimes the idea is, well, they're going to come in with a template or cookie cutter, and they're going to try to change us into something that we're not. And I love that you're pointing out that that's not what it is. It's providing resources and information and a framework and a structure and processes and strategies that allow you to be who you are, but even better. And that's exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's why Main Street is so successful, because they understand that every downtown is unique. So they create a framework that's flexible enough to work with a really urban big downtown, places like Baltimore and Chicago, and rural downtowns, and downtowns like Grosse Pointe that were kind of in the middle of those, but to allow the downtown to use the program the way they need to be better, while still giving that framework.
Casey.
This is why Cindy is such a treasure, because on the most basic level, she understands Main Street so well. And that's why I feel so lucky to be a part of it, because it's like running another business, right? You have to be deliberate and intentional, or again, you're like a ping pong ball. And that's what I felt like we were doing before we started down this road. We were fine. Everybody was doing their thing, and we would have been fine, but we wouldn't have been our best. And I think that that's what Main Street is going to teach us. And again, we stumble a little, and we identify where we are absolutely miserably inadequate. But for the most part, it's empowering. It's empowering to know what we can be,
because we're better than fine, and we're better than good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love how honest you guys are being with that, because do our communities struggle? Yes, we do. Are there things that we can do better? Yes, there are. And so that's not saying anything about Grosse Pointe specifically. That's saying this is how communities operate. Is we have some things that are shining jewels that we would shout from the mountaintops, and we have some areas where we're like, man, we really got to do better at that. And I think that's kind of the first step in even thinking about becoming Main Street is kind of the acknowledgement of that. And then Cindy, of what you said, is like, we can be better than fine. We can be better than good. We can be better than what we are. So then how do we become that? And that, man, exciting. So I want to thank both of you guys for the time that you took for this interview today, for chauffeuring me around Grosse Pointe and hanging out. If somebody's listening to this podcast and they want to kind of dip their toe in a little Grosse Pointe on the interwebs, where would they go, on social media or on a website?
They would go to thevillagegrossepointe.org. Our Facebook page is the Village Downtown Grosse Pointe. They can always call our office. I'm usually there, but leave me a message if I'm not, which is 313-886-7474, or pop in and talk to any of our business owners. You know, our board of directors, a lot of them own businesses. Stop in Small Favors and see if Casey's there, or pop in Apple Blossom Baby and talk to Ann Murphy, or go down to Savvy Chic and talk to Lana.
Yeah, I give this encouragement. Yeah, sure, check them out on social media. Shoot them an email, look at their website, but really you have to hop on your bike, jump in a car, come here to really experience this community. So thank you both for the work that you're doing for your community here in Grosse Pointe, for the time you took today. Casey and Cindy, you guys are the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.